Good evening again. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting for the Village of Cary for February 3rd, 2026 to order with roll call, please.
Collier,
Here.
Dudek,
Here.
McAlpine,
Here.
Persina,
Here.
Stefani,
Here.
Walrath,
Here.
Kounick.
I'm here. Please join me again for the pledge. Now moving to the public comments, where the public is invited, given an opportunity to address the Committee of the Whole on any matter otherwise not on the agenda. Is there anybody here who'd like to address the Committee of the Whole? None said. We will close public comments at 6:04. We have one item on our agenda for this evening is the continuation of a discussion regarding video gaming regulations. Director Simmons, please.
Thank you, Mayor, Village Board. The item for discussion tonight is this continuation of our conversation or discussion back in September. As the board may recall, there were three primary issues or concerns that the board had at that time related to video gaming that staff went back and reviewed our existing codes further and then are recommending for discussion this evening. On the dais, I did provide a copy of our existing regulations for video gaming as well as a copy of the slides. So if there's any questions, you can refer to those throughout. To recap, the three main areas of concern that were discussed back in September were signage for businesses, as far as what type of signs are allowed and currently within the code, and then potentially restricting signage for video gaming in establishments. Also, there's some discussion regarding our ratio of machines to seats within the establishments, and then the general layout of the establishment, including where machines would be located at, visibility outside the space, and also requirements for kitchens. This slide here summarizes both the existing language and proposed language regarding signage for establishments. As a recap, our existing code does allow for temporary and window signs in establishments that can advertise gaming. It does not allow for permanent signage or any sort of off-premise signs as well. With the proposed revisions based on discussion back in September, staff is recommending that the code be updated to restrict the use of permanent, temporary, window, electronic message, or other off-site signs for gaming advertisements. So establishment would not be able to have any signage that would be visible outside the establishment indicating that there's gaming at the location. With the provision, staff is recommending that if with existing signage that there be a amortization period essentially, so that the businesses would have time to comply with the regulation. In this slide here, it doesn't establish a date certain. That's an item that we can be discussed with the village board as well, if it's give them through the next license year or another time period from that standpoint to bring the businesses into compliance. The second item that was discussed was the ratio of machines to seats. This slide shows the existing regulation, which is a restriction that we added back in, I think, 2019 or earlier for gaming cafes. The restriction on gaming cafes was the 10-to-1 seat requirement. As shown on the slide, the existing businesses that are licensed within the village, what their current seating ratio is based on floor plans that we have on file and the number of terminals that they have. You can see the majority of them do comply with that 10-to-1 ratio. The two that are asterisks didn't have accurate site plans or don't have enough seats to comply with the regulation. From a community survey that was performed of other communities, the Village of Cary is one of the more restrictive organizations as far as this requirement. Algonquin, the Village of Cary, and McHenry have similar regulations. And Wonder Lake has a ratio of 5-to-1 for machines. Other municipalities in the area do not have a requirement in this regards. So within the code as presented before you, staff is currently not proposing to recommend a change to this requirement, but is an area that we can discuss further as well. Other requirements as far as the layout of the establishment is what was discussed back in September. There was concerns as far as how gaming terminals are laid out in a space, what their visibility is from the exterior of a space, but also how they're separated within an establishment from the general dining area. So staff, in this case, is recommending possible modifications to the language that would still have the areas not be accessible to minors, but establishing a separate room with the use of walls or half walls, as opposed to the use of temporary stanchions, which are currently used in some establishments to separate the gaming area so that they would not be highly visible as you're walking into an establishment. But then also furthering strengthening the language so that the gaming terminals cannot be visible from outside of the establishment. This slide just shows an example of some preferred separation that the board has approved in other locations within the village. The two on the right are two new businesses that are going to be opening within this year that would have separate rooms established for those areas. And the third on the left is an existing restaurant in the community that has, again, a separate room off the bar area where the entrance to those rooms is visible from the bar area, so that it complies with the regulations for visibility for entering that space. Some other minor tweaks that staff is recommending to the language within the code would be for the layout of the establishment, looking at the video gaming cafes language that we have, specifically paragraph 3 here basically speaks to the use of a commercial kitchen on the property. So looking to modify that so that still requires the operation of a commercial kitchen on the property, and then requirements to include a grease trap based on the type of food that's produced at the establishment, and then not allowing for the partnership with an establishment off-premise that has a commercial kitchen. So any establishment that would look to have gaming provided in the future would require to have a kitchen in their facility, as opposed to partnering with an adjacent use from that standpoint. Lastly, just this was not discussed at the previous meeting, but it was something that during staff's research we came across. There are some communities that do have requirements for the actual revenue that's generated by the establishment. Just for additional discussion, this slide shows the revenue comparison for businesses that are in the village, the revenue that they generated in 2024 versus the terminal income that they also generated that they received directly from having gaming machines in their establishment. So as you can see in the slide, generally the majority of them are 15% or lower from a revenue standpoint. There are a couple outliers that are closer to 50% of their revenue is derived strictly from gaming. But currently our requirements identify the source of proposed actual revenue. It doesn't establish a dollar amount or percentage, but just want to provide this information for different reference if there's a concern or a desire to add regulations regarding the split of revenues as well. That essentially summarizes the information that I had new from our last discussion. Happy to answer any questions that the board may have, but just wanted to present the information to the board, and then we can continue based on discussion to draft final changes or regulations for the board's consideration at a future meeting date.
Let's open it up for some discussion.
I have a clarification question. We have two facilities that don't comply currently because they are grandfathered in. Any change to any of these ordinances that would be inclusive of their exclusion as it is right now? Would that be retroactive? Would we basically be requiring them to come into compliance or forfeit the games, or would they continue to be grandfathered in as is?
Based on the current language that I've drafted, they would continue to be grandfathered in. If the board desires to have all businesses comply with the regulation, that can be an extra section that we can add to the ordinance that would establish an amortization period for them to be brought into compliance. So within the ordinance that you have before you would be adding another section of 5.34.100 that we can establish a requirement that would say any businesses that are currently licensed within the village would have to comply with all the regulations by a future date certain, to be determined by the board.
To go off of that, is there an actual number for those two, for the seat requirement? I understand you put an asterisk in there, but. do you know what it is?
Yeah, for the Maple Tree, and I don't have an accurate floor plan, they were approved prior to our code requirements, so they had gaming machines that were added back in 2014 or 2013. The other establishment has no food or alcohol, or no food at the establishment, so they have no seating in there now.
Thank you for clarifying.
In the new ordinance that you've written now, if either of these two non-compliants now sold again, would they be required to come into code?
That's within the way the ordinance is drafted right now. The changes, if it were to transfer ownership, there's no provision there that would restrict them from having to come back, but that's something that could be added.
To your point, I feel like there were some talking points during the last discussion of building in some language to say, if the business is sold, we reapply for a license. You're not inheriting a license through the sale.
I'd love to see that in, for sure.
Yeah, that's,
I think that's a fair
Well,
piece.
and I think we learned
think
that
we
we
all-
need to do that.
I think we all agreed on it at the last meeting.
As
that-
far as making them come into compliance, I'm open to
Well, you know,
discussion.
that's-
I just think
you know,
that's a tough road.
It's a slippery slope. I mean, they've been grandfathered in. For the
Attorney
most
Yu,
part,
is
they're,
that legally tough also?
Which question?
All of them. If we require the two non-compliants now to come within compliance or lose their gaming.
It depends what the initial status is that we approved and that we're going to be changing. So they've made investments in these various businesses that they will claim they have a vested right to continue. So I think it depends on an examination of the particular business that we have granted an approval to, what they've been allowed to do, what they've invested in the business. But eventually, yes, I think you can require, as Brian has indicated, that the businesses be included in an amortization schedule of some kind to eventually come into compliance. That should apply to most businesses. Brian, you had mentioned if a business gets sold in Cary, the liquor license is not automatic for the next business.
Correct.
They have to reapply, so. And a video
Goes along
gaming
with it.
license first requires a liquor license.
Yeah, so from a language in the code standpoint, if that's a desire of the board, you certainly can draft a condition that if the liquor license or the gaming license is not transferable upon the sale, and that if a business transfer or is sold, that it has to comply with the ordinance as currently drafted, the regulations.
Yeah,
currently.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that that's very fair. I mean, I think that, number one, we need to make sure that anything we're doing is legally sound. Because the last thing we want to do is say, whether it's signage, whether it's transferring licenses, we don't want to get in a situation where we think we can do something and then we can't, and we put something in place that we cannot stand by. But I think the reason we're having this discussion is because there are concerns. There's concerns with what's going on. We've been very, very deliberate with regards to what we want video gaming to look like in our town and what we don't want it to look like. So I think that it's extremely important that we look at this, but I also want to be cognizant of the fact that I don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face if we have someone come to us that is a big business, and then we say, hey, we've tunneled this in and said you can't do anything. Then they're going to go, hey, I'm going to go to Crystal Lake, or I'm going to go to Barrington, or I'm not going to come to Cary. So I just want to make sure we balance everything, that we achieve what we're looking to do in a very methodical way, if that makes sense.
I think we also need to take it one step further, too. As we all know, there are additional partners that invest in companies, and when the original person walks away, I think that is something that we got to make sure that we're sound on as well.
Yeah, so any change, you're
Change
talking
in
about any
ownership.
change in ownership.
Yes, I
Percentage,
like that.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
The other thing that that I did discuss with the mayor was whether or not we could put something in place, and I don't know if we even have an appetite for this, but if we said if it's a new business, that they could come to town, and you were saying that some of the municipalities around us might have like a 1 year, you have to be in business a year before you can get a video gaming license, so that we can make sure that they're a viable business. But I don't know if that's something legal that we can even do.
There are a few establishments that, or few local municipalities that do have that requirement. It's the question, if you do that, is how does the area, what threshold do they need to meet to then get a gaming license at that point?
Well, and then does it make them not want to come here?
Yeah, well, we want to continue with, we've worked so hard over the last decade or so to be really known as a business-friendly community. We want to make sure that we're providing the same opportunities to everybody, but, I think enforcement is a big thing that we need to look at. I hear in the community all the time, people are like, enough of the gaming. We got enough gaming. And I take that to heart. I think, that's something we need to look, which is why we're having this conversation. I think the board has that same appetite. I think by maybe drawing a line in the sand, this is the number of machines we have right now, and if you have a new viable business that comes in, it's part of their business plan, which most restaurants want that. And I think our main point is that we have a viable restaurant with a full-service kitchen, full-service bar that has a gaming, like the new ones, like Brian, those slides that you show with the new ones, that they're off the beaten path. No, you're not walking in and seeing them. I think that's something that the community would respect, but at the same time, giving them an opportunity to know where we stand. This is what we want. There's, the two that don't have it, they were grandfathered in. I think that's something that, in my opinion, that we need to honor that. And until there's a change in ownership, period, any change in ownership, they have to reapply and then fall into our compliance. I think that's very fair. One of the things that I hear a lot too, and I think several people on this board have talked about the signage issue. I think that's something that we need to delve into, and have a very robust discussion about what we want our town to look like, how it looks from the outside, So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. I think we know where we are when it comes to the licensing. We beat that.
I have one question about that. So are you in favor of telling a new business coming in that's fully compliant, yes, they have gaming if it's out of sight, like we're proposing there?
Yes.
Okay.
I would support that.
And thanks for the segue, Mayor. That's why I was going to make the suggestion that before, because this is such a multi-pronged conversation, that let's address the two potential changes that Brian put out first, discuss them, and then we can branch off from there. So and the mayor segued in nicely into signage, and that was something I brought up with staff, and I think that it's not too much to ask, and I think I've been somewhat validated with the slide that's up on the screen right now. Just went away. The showing the total total volume of what these facilities are getting in terms of what percentage of revenue they're counting on from these. And we have a good mix, a solid amount that this is really ancillary. If you went back 30 years ago, that was probably the same percentage they were getting from a jukebox and a dart machine. So the intent, I believe, that this board has had in the past and currently is that this is an ancillary revenue stream. It's an enhancement to their current business model. And I don't think that we want signage that's going to reflect something different. If it says gaming here, J&J here, not to throw out names of providers, but if it has more of that on the window and outside than it does the name of the facility or what they offer, I have a concern with that. Particularly when, several of them are right on our busiest street, and you drive through downtown Cary and you're seeing play here, win here, and all these things. I'm not in favor of that at all. They need to comply. My interpretation of the ordinance that we currently have is we want it out of sight. It needs to be completely out of sight, which the new guidelines we've seen for the two new plans coming in have. We need to take it that additional step, which is the signage cannot be viewed. We don't need any signage. We're not advertising French fries. You're advertising pizza. I'll get off my soapbox on signage, but I'm very much in favor of the way this is written.
Yeah, I think this is the conversation I was really looking forward to have because, I think what we talked about, licensing and that stuff, I think that we're all on the same page, but there are people with different opinions with the signage and limiting the signage. Do we allow some sort of signage? And I will defer to our attorney here about what we can and cannot do. I know we can't regulate content, but we can regulate the number of signs and size of the signs. Right. And I think that's where we need to, and the type of signs, like we're very particular on some of The channel signs that we have. We don't allow box signs with the plate. I mean, that was something that we eliminated a long time ago. So they're more nicer looking signs. But, you know, you have all these banners that are going up, gaming here, gaming there. You got the ones that light up, and that's a, where do we see ourselves as a community? How do we want to be represented? What's the word? How do we
want to
I'll try
represent?
the third time. How do we want to represent ourselves when people are driving through our community, or even frequenting an establishment that might be off the beaten path? I think that says a lot about us, and I think there's several in town that we really need to take a second look at and what we're doing.
So here's my question, and Attorney, there's other businesses such as smoke shops that advertise on their windows also. I'm not in favor of that either. Can we not restrict that? I don't understand what we can restrict.
I
lawfully.
agree. I want to know legally what we can do versus us putting something in. If
I think
content,
there
if
needs
we
to be more
cannot regulate,
change.
yeah, if we can't regulate content, then
How do you
Can't they
tell
just
them to
put whatever
take
they
that
wanna
no
put on it?
gambling sign down?
So if the principal business at a smoke shop is smoke shop, you're suggesting they not be allowed signage?
Their sign's already up on the outside of the building. I'm talking about window advertisements
Well,
that
sure,
are placed.
sure, those are subject to regulation. We have,
We have regulations.
I
for
know we
window
do,
signs,
but I'm
yes,
asking.
Yeah, it's
absolutely. We
clarification.
have the ability to
That you could have no
regulate.
signage on your windows if your business is advertised with the sign on the front of the building?
We could do that if we chose to. I think we want to examine what that means for various businesses in town, but yes. So selecting out one based on
I'm
content.
not, I'm talking, yeah. So I'm putting a broad brush on it and saying none of that in any of the
There-
windows, because I think it's a bad look,
So it
personally.
would be based off the license that the village would be issuing,
Okay.
as opposed to, so if we're issuing a license for a establishment that has gaming, as part of that license, we're restricting that they can't have any signs that would indicate that they have gaming at that establishment. They still can have other signs that are allowed for a restaurant. So if they have a window sign they want to have or something like that, liquor, is a good example. They could have a sign in their window indicating that they sell Pabst beer or something in the establishment. So we would have requirements as far as the amount of signage they can have in the window from that standpoint. But with the license being issued, we can restrict that they can't have any license for advertising the gaming operation there.
Ancillary.
Potentially the same could be the case for a tobacco license. You know, you can potentially restrict window signage in an establishment that has a license from the village.
We don't let the cannabis, by state law, is different because they can't advertise on their windows? Yes? Okay.
Correct.
And they can't
Yeah.
show the leaves or anything.
Okay, I'm just asking.
That's a whole different,
Yeah.
that's a state.
different. Okay.
But it's the license that we're issuing for the establishment is how we could regulate that further. So the type of business, by getting a license from the village, there's additional control that we can have for that type of business. But generally, if we allow signage for a regular business, you know, they can't exceed the 20%, but we can't regulate the content of what's in that sign.
All right, we'll just stick to gaming tonight then, I guess.
Yeah, gaming, this is what,
Okay.
I like the direction you're going, but that's a conversation for another night. That's just, yeah, which, yeah, we can delve into in the next few months. But I always go to the left here. I'm going to go to the right. Oh, he's firing up. He's firing up. I know exactly what he's going to say.
I ran out of ink. God, I wish my first comments when we brought this up years ago could be replayed, because it's turned out to be exactly what I thought it might be, a disaster. Just as I read this information, is the Orchard Prime Meat, is that our applicant? Because if he's the applicant, he doesn't meet any of the requirements that you lay out here. He doesn't serve alcohol, he doesn't serve food.
Yeah, it's the
Orchard Prime Meats?
it's the
It's the
Yeah.
it's the Galati's that owns everything there.
I understand, but is our applicant Orchard Prime Meats or is it Galati's?
I think it's Galati. Well, I think it's just known.
It's
as-
Orchard Prime Meats is the applicant, which all the revenue that goes through that establishment, including the Uncle Jerry's that's in there, is all through Orchard Prime. All the sales go through that business entity.
Even though the business that's there is not Orchard Prime Meats.
That, yeah.
Or is it?
That's all in their rental.
Okay, that's
agreement.
a disaster. But anyway, we all know it's a disaster too. It would also seem that Lucky Pennies, by definition, is a gaming cafe because the majority of their revenue, over 50%, is derived from gaming. Two others have substantial gaming. One of them almost 50%, and then another one at 28. So, are they gaming places or are they establishments? You make the decision. I'm not going to make it. One of them's clear. It's a gaming.
Well, I think, just correct me,
And within our code, there is no limit on what the
Percentage.
percentage is, so that has not been established in the code. The code is, the language basically speaks towards, when we're considering if it's a gaming cafe, what where the revenue is coming from for the establishment, but there's no percentage that was established within the code. So that's a question, for discussion here is if you want to make that change, is there minimum non-gaming sales that are produced in the establishment, or establish a percentage as well that
Yeah.
can determine
So
that?
towns that have, you said there's several that have a threshold?
No, there's one local that has a
Okay,
threshold.
how would you regulate that? Do you make them turn off the machines when they're a certain percentage? I'm confused.
So it would be, as part of the enforcement of the license, there would be potentially a violation of the license. So we can have a hearing to review what their sales are, determine whether they comply with the requirements, and then they are in danger of losing the license on an annual basis if they would exceed that. But that would be part of the renewal process, would be to determine if they're actually compliant with the regulations, if there's a requirement for minimum sales or a ratio of gaming versus non-gaming sales.
I would say respectfully, as long as the establishment is in compliance with having a commercial kitchen, having a fully stocked bar, you can't. In my opinion, you shouldn't penalize them for being a larger group of people's favorite spot to go participate in that gambling. I don't think we should penalize a business just because people like to go there to do that. They're in compliance in all other areas. I don't think enacting a cap on their percentage is fair to the business. They're doing a good job bringing people back consistently.
I would certainly second that, and probably more importantly from my end, that's not an enforcement level that we're remotely interested in getting into. I would agree with Trustee Dudek that we do have gaming cafes, whether we intended to or not. And I think we do need to have the very, very difficult discussion about whether we're going to continue to allow that, regardless of ownership change. I think we would not be doing our duty as a board if we didn't actually have a discussion of what do we want to do with the current ones. If we just wait for ownership change, that could be 40 years in the future. So I think it's a tough decision to have, but it's not, if we have 14 others that are compliant and 2 that are not, what do we talk about when it comes to signage? What do we talk about when everything else that's been a hot topic around here for the last 8 years? Compliance is what we want. And we have 2 that we are legally, currently, obliged to allow non-compliance. And I have no horse
as they
in the
say,
race.
what do they call legally non-conforming?
Thank you, that was the phrase I was digging for. I think we need to have that discussion about what that would look like and the runway to allow them to come into compliance. Because if my memory serves for both of those facilities, there's probably an opportunity for them to become compliant with some more investment. But that's, I think, a discussion we should have along with finishing up the last 2 pieces that we have here on current ordinance suggestions.
Well, again, I think the spirit of what we're looking for is the more like the 750s, the Cary Ale House. You look at that's the ancillary businesses that support what a patron wants. We're not looking. We need to look at this, and I'm glad that you brought that up. We need to look at, do we want to allow gaming parlors, and which essentially that they are. But I don't know if I should be mentioning all these names here, but I just feel that there might be opportunities to, hey, look, you're teetering on becoming more of a gaming parlor. We're looking for you to enhance the other aspects of your business. What's your plan? So it remains to be seen what we can do. I think it's important that we be realistic in our expectations from especially our existing businesses. You know, we don't want to put anybody out, but you know, maybe it's been thrown out, ramp them up to be in compliance to what our codes are. That's something that we might want to consider.
I understand the frustration of what is the phrase? The non-compliant, legally non-compliant.
Legal non-conforming.
I can certainly appreciate the frustration there. I feel more strongly in being friendly to the businesses that we currently have and trying to find a way to work with them, to everyone's point of, are you looking for a reinvestment? What can we do to try and get this further into compliance? But forcing the hand of a business owner to modify their business or you know, like you have to reinvest, otherwise, you know, this is bold, but or we'll shut you down. So, something I don't care for that language. Again, I appreciate what we want to do in the future, and I think with some of these ones that for one reason or another kind of snuck by, I think we just gotta. I'm more comfortable with waiting them out or helping them find methods for reinvestment to try and get them closer to what we want to see. That's just my opinion on that. And if we can sort of going back to the signage while I got a hot mic, if we are able to say across the board, look, we want a certain look in the village. We want it to be a little bit more tasteful. We're not going to allow advertising for gambling specifically in your windows. I think giving a good runway for that is a fair ask. Everyone knows where the gambling machines are. And some people would even go so far as to say, oh, I just assume it's everywhere. I don't necessarily find an intense need for them to be advertising like there's gambling in here. It's a small enough town, everybody knows where it is. If we can get that enacted to say, let's get these signs down out of the front window, I think that's a great place to start, and then having strong rules in place for future businesses. That's my comfort zone.
Well, Trustee Collier, did you want to offer any?
I agree with Trustee Walworth, but it's sure hard to get somebody. We know who we know the two we're talking about. It's plain as day. But one probably has a bigger opportunity, and the one doesn't to add a kitchen. Correct.
Correct.
The one's never going to come into compliance. It's impossible, unless they bought the business next door to them. Correct.
I agree. I
It's
think
hard.
that
I agree, but with them, but we can ask kindly, but kindly is going to get you nowhere.
Well,
Business aren't going to invest money into something that's not making them money.
And I don't know that our role is to tell people what their business model has to be. You know, I'm just saying I look at this as one of those things that we're seeing where we fell short, right? We've seen what we did that we didn't have set up there so that it would be enacted the way we wanted it to. So trying to tighten up the rules when it comes to the signage, when it comes to compliance with everything. But I don't think it's our role to tell people, here's what you have to do. I would not be comfortable saying to a business, hey, you know, we don't like what you're doing, and I know you're making good money, but you got to change. So I'm not really comfortable with that part of it, but I'm very comfortable with saying we need to tighten up things. We need to make sure that we have things moving forward, that we can correct some of these things and correcting some of those signage things and giving them an amortization or, you know, a sunset date for when they can do some of these things. I think that it's incumbent upon us to do that. I mean, we need to do that because it's really important how we want our town to be perceived, and we want to be encouraging to bring new businesses to our town.
If I could continue the conversation and purely playing to Trustee
To
Collier's
after
point,
the board discussion.
we all know we all know the folks involved, and the two places that are non-compliant have two other businesses in town that also have opportunity that have the same gaming. So it's 4 places and two ownership groups. And I'll respectfully disagree. We are in the business of telling people what their business model is. That's exactly what this is. You can't have a gaming parlor at a dog wash. You can't have a gaming parlor at a gas station, and they have asked.
I
So,
agree.
yeah, we are certainly in that business, and what we're trying to do is maintain what we would like gaming to look like. The devil's advocate piece, I would say, is, yeah, it is a tough conversation with people to tell them, we want this business to change, but both of those owners are currently undergoing other investments in their, so they've invested in properties that are still on this list to improve them, to make them nicer, to make them not necessarily be compliant for us, but as a result, they've gained more seats, or they've put the gaming into different areas, et cetera. They've made those improvements on their own. So I think we should be advocating as a staff and as a board for the other two non-compliant places. Say, listen, we're opening up another place here. You're opening up another place, and you're going to do it the way we want it. Wonderful. Love to have you. We think you're a great partner. Let's talk about the place that isn't compliant. What could we do there? What can we do to try and come closer to compliance? Maybe not on the food end, but maybe on the restricted access, no view end. So just trying to take that down the road. They are good people. We all met them. We all know them. They're good, reasonable people. Just explain to them that we don't want to be, to Trustee Pacino's point, we don't want to be in the point of just saying, hey, you've got 5 years to come in compliance, or we're going to close you down. That's not the position we want to take. But I think we need to have the discussion with them about continuing their investment back into these two properties rather than just in the other two.
Would that be something that village staff could reach out to those owners, talk to them about this compliance that we're talking about, and see what would be required of them to come close to this at least?
Well, certainly staff can have conversations, but we also have to
Have an ordinance?
in having conversations, we don't have a lot of leverage.
Right.
That was the key part. And we also, as it's been stated here, we are we have a culture of being business friendly. So we have to do that messaging in a very intentional way. So we just need to be careful with that.
But I think this is more of like a moving forward conversation
Right.
as to where our expectations are. And along the way, we can pick up some of the stragglers and remind them that here's a copy of our ordinance, just so you're aware of these things, giving them an opportunity. They may not even know. This is the slippery slope we were talking about before when I was on the board. Well, I was the mayor at the time when we allowed gaming, but we were trying to be fair to everybody, just so there's a little history here. Open it up to every liquor license holder for what it was, like 60 days or something like that, and then we closed it, and then we came up with an ordinance that we all wanted to live with, which I might add that there's many municipalities that have used our ordinance because it's a very good and it's a fair ordinance. But, there comes, we're hearing all these things, and we want to look at how we want the community to look. So I think, moving forward, the existing businesses that we have right now, I think that's something that we can have a conversation at. But Brian is getting a lot of questions about new businesses wanting to come here. What are our expectations? I'm sure are you still getting all the gaming parlor all the time? So
They come in waves, yeah.
yeah, they come a lot. And he's saying, I got another one. I'm like, well, we don't. But we have to be on the same page and be fair to everybody. So our messaging is consistent, and it gives staff the opportunity to say, look, this is the direction the board wants to go. And I think by tightening up some of these things, by looking at what our expectations are from a community, that makes a better sense of why we're doing what we're doing right now. We're not prohibiting it. We're just saying, look, this is what we would like to see. And I don't think that that's an unfair ask or expectation for a potential new business. I believe that they feel that this is expected of them.
Can I just ask one quick question? So your proposed language says exterior. Should that also read interior? Because I think of the inside of a window. That's where a lot of the stuff is.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the window definition of a sign is it's a sign that's on the interior space is be intended to be viewed from outside.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be affixed to the window. It could be 5 feet behind a window, but if it still is intended to be viewed outside, by our definition, that's a window sign.
Okay.
That's okay. I just want to kind of take each one of these real quickly. So on the signage piece, has village attorney reviewed our proposed language? And do you have any comments on it?
I I have. There is still going to be somewhat of a gray area, as we found out this last year. Yes, this is compliant. I might add that we may want to tweak this with the primary, the signage for these establishments has to focus on the primary business. So whatever the business is, the alcohol being served, the food being served, or both, that the signage has to be focused directly on that business component. And then the rest of the language is fine.
Okay,
I think that just tightens it a little bit.
okay, I would agree with that, and shame on me, I should probably know this answer, but do we have any of our existing establishments that have video gaming have a sign in their window that says video gaming? I frankly do not know. Do we?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right,
There's several, a lot of them do.
okay. So they are non-compliant, correct, as it relates to the current sign
No.
ordinance?
No,
Our
no.
current
Their
code.
current code allows it.
Code allows for temporary and window signage in accordance with the code, so they can have that currently.
But what is the definition of temporary? 3 years? I mean, what? do
Temporary,
we have?
a temporary sign is like a banner that somebody can put out on a property. They can, correct. The window signs, there's no limit as far as how long a sign can be in a window. It can be a permanent sign in their window. But a temporary sign would be a banner, a feather sign, things like that you can put on the property. There's time limits for those within the code.
All right. Would you mind, Brian or Eric, either one of you, I don't want to drive around town and identify who they are. Just let me know who has them, because I don't go to every one of them, and I'm curious. The ratio of machines to seats, I don't have any issues there. I think that's the right thing to do. The layout, we do have issues with layouts in a couple, so I'm totally, in support of that. I won't even get into the definition of the cafe because we have non-compliant people there. Your last piece, the source of proposed / actual revenue, I think the concept there might have some merit. As I was looking at it, I'm almost thinking that maybe a percentage of the revenue would be the way I would look at it versus the revenues they actually generate. Because to me, again, I said I wasn't going to say it, but when somebody's at 50% or more, to me, they're a gaming cafe. So I like the percentage versus the dollar amount of revenue. So that would be my comment relative to your last item. With that, I have nothing else to say.
I get it, and I kind of I agree with it. Like maybe 50% of the revenue it can't be more than 50% of the. But how do we do that? Yeah. Like 10. Well, yeah, I get it.
And I think where you're getting at too is and I understand your perspective on it, is that if you look at the mix of businesses that are up here, the sit-down restaurants generally have a smaller percentage of the revenue, versus bars have a tendency to have a higher percentage of revenue from gaming. It's the type of clientele, the business environment that they have there. They do produce more. So you're not having as much food at those establishments as more alcohol sales, and the gaming revenue, competes directly with that. The one business has close to 50%. Majority of their sales are alcohol. I mean, there's really no food in the establishment at all.
So does that, I'm just curious, Brian, and you don't have to answer if you want to think about it for a while, but does that raise the question that we should maybe have one set of rules for a bar and another set of rules for restaurants?
It's debatable from that standpoint. I think from a code standpoint, we have within our code, we allow bars, specifically. So, and that's there's a definition. If you have more than 50% of your sales are alcohol, then you're classified as a bar, and you're allowed within certain zoning districts. So we do currently permit bars that would not even need to provide food within the code.
Okay.
So the percentage of revenue is looking at it from a standpoint if there's a desire to, limit gaming cafes where it's the main revenue is from gaming, where our establishments they're still operating as bars, as opposed to a gaming cafe where you have, one employee that's there with the machines, and they have a refrigerator that they have, beer within it. That's, I think, more of what the board was trying to stay away from originally when we drafted those regulations, than the establishment that I'm referring to here was established before we had this code or gaming was even allowed in the village. So it's looking forward as, we wanted to restrict the certain businesses that come in that are specifically for gaming. So if there's, somebody has a unique concept for a bar, do we still want to restrict that because there is still a clientele in the village that may want that facility that, is still would be beneficial to the community to have that type of establishment come in? Does there need to be a substantial amount of food that's provided there? Or, if it's a 50-50 percentage you're looking at from gaming standpoint, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, if there's a desire to not exceed that 50% gaming revenue, then you can certainly set up where if they have more alcohol sales, as long as they still don't exceed that 50-50 ratio, then they would be compliant from a code standpoint. I think, the two establishments that are very close to that 50% threshold, they have a large amount of regulars or customers that go to their facilities on a regular basis. They do have quite a bit of customers that go to those establishments, but more of their sales are on the alcohol side versus the food side.
Attorney Euler has a suggestion that might.
Are you trying to clarify? We have the provision in the definition of video gaming cafe when alcohol and food is secondary to the video gaming? Because you could, as one of the criteria, without necessarily making it the only criteria or a determinative criteria, create a percentage. If it's over 50%, over 40%, over 30%, whatever it is, that's one of the criteria the village staff looks to in determining whether or not it is a video gaming cafe.
I'm one voice.
No.
And I don't particularly care for the concept of video gaming, period. It's long established. I prefer to call it what it is. If somebody's at 58% of their revenue from gaming, they are not a restaurant. I'm sorry. They're a gaming hall. So
Right.
I like the percentage.
So we have that, right, we have that open now, so percentage may be helpful in more precisely defining what is or isn't a video gaming
Right.
cafe, yeah.
And that's why I said, when the mayor said 50%, I said, no, I'm a lot lower than that. And my vote will be a low number, and if I'm outvoted, I'm outvoted. That's the American way. But my whole feeling on this thing is you get what you allow to come in. When you set your standards low, you get what you get. And we get people that come in, open a business, and 6 months later they're closed. We don't need that. We need the high-quality people that come here. They do $5-10 million a year in revenue, not $250,000, because that's the business that can go out tomorrow. So, again, overstepping maybe perhaps my boundaries, but when you allow stuff like we have in, you get stuff like we have, and I prefer to get a few notches above.
What percentage would you like to see?
Let's quickly add first. So from a zoning code standpoint, there's two different definitions that we have in the code for these types of businesses. You have restaurants that are permitted uses, and then there's bars that are also permitted uses in certain zoning districts. So if we're referring to all these, referencing in this conversation as all as restaurants, but within our code they're identified differently. So there's different provisions as far as how much of their sales need to be from alcohol and food if they're a bar versus a restaurant. So if you're more than 50% of your sales are from food sales, then they're classified as a restaurant within our code. If, as part of our annual renewals for our licenses, they're required to provide us with what their breakdown of sales from food versus alcohol is. And if it's more than 50% for alcohol, they're classified as a bar, and they have to be in a zoning district that allows for that. So just from this table, we're looking at them all as businesses, but there is a difference between each one of these businesses from a zoning perspective as well.
How many are considered bars right now? Not the names, just the number of them.
Of these, I'd say 3 of these are bars.
Thank you.
And 2 of which are grandfathered in.
Right.
3 are bars. The other one that's grandfathered in is a tobacco store.
Could I ask Director Simmons about, are there any other ordinances that other municipalities you're aware of, and maybe Attorney Euler can help as well, that restrict the number of seats based on these kind of criteria? We have seats tied to, we have terminals tied to seats. Is there anybody out there saying, yes, if you're a restaurant, you can get maximum 6 terminals with 60-plus seating? Is there anybody saying if you're classified as a bar or those that allow gaming parlor to only have 2 or 3 or restrict the number of terminals they can have?
Not that I'm aware of. I think currently, as mentioned, we're one of the few established communities that restricts based on the number of terminals to seats, and our requirements are similar to others that are in the area.
Would there be anything, Attorney Euler, legally concerning about having a maximum number of terminals for something we classify as a bar based on revenue versus a restaurant based on revenue?
No, you could do it either way. You can create the criteria you want for the establishment.
I just want to add, I guess specific to if a criteria is to be considered relative to revenue, that is, from my understanding, not something that very many communities do. Director Simmons can correct me, I think only one does in the entire area. So keep that in mind. It is one of those parameters that may have some administrative legwork involved in order to monitor and enforce. I kind of maybe consider it kind of similar to a community that does vehicle stickers. You know, seems like a logical practice on paper. When you have to administer it with a small but mighty team, it does become a lot bigger of a hurdle. So just keeping that in mind with the regulations that we consider, just make sure that we also consider how are we going to monitor and enforce.
The pathway I was somewhat laying out for discussion was the intent of the board, as I hear it, is, you know, restaurants that have this, it's an ancillary item, and that's what we are okay with. And bars that have this, we start to get into a gray area, because the very successful bars, it doesn't seem to be an issue. The bars that potentially are struggling revenue-wise, if they lost this, then they probably would be out of business. So the pathway that I was suggesting for discussion was at some designated regular interval, the newer business for the first X periods has to show us on a yearly basis to get renewed what their sales are and what that percentage is. And if they get reclassified as a bar, then they would have 2 or 3 terminals only available, with the intent being you now have an opportunity to come into compliance with what we want to see, which is a restaurant. And if you're a bar, then it needs to be very much an ancillary item as well, not your primary item. So it does allow some modicum of control to reduce the footprint of gaming in town if you're trending to being a bar/gaming parlor. So again, that's just a topic that is out that I have for discussion. If the attorney and Director Simmons think it's something that could be put up in a code and enforced relatively easily, I would not see this for somebody who's been around for 15 years and been consistent. At a certain point, you get exited from this lead-up program because you are what you are and we're either okay with you or you're not. But using the conversation we've had already about we don't know what's coming to town, we want you to prove yourself, this is an opportunity for them to lay out some guidelines and say, at year 1, at year 2, at year 3, you need to show us that you're doing what your business plan said you were going to do. And if you are, then you can continue with the maximum number of terminals. If you are not, you need to rethink, and then we can reduce terminals.
I think that's a great idea. I just add one piece onto it. Would you, as it relates to new businesses, would you want to add on that you have to be a business in town for X length of time before you institute that, or not?
I don't think so. I think that's asking that's too big of a leap right off the bat. And if this was 10 years ago, maybe. But right now, it's such an ingrained part of this entire F&B community around here, a hospitality community, that if you make somebody do that, I think you're telling them we don't want anything but coffee shops and bakeries. You're not going to get any real restaurants unless you have white linen.
Yeah, that makes sense. It does. I mean, because that it's built in, and Brian will tell you, and with the conversation, it's built into their pro forma. Gaming is how they will, they'll cover their overhead. I get it. I understand these things, but I think from what I'm hearing is that we need to be a little bit more everybody's agreeing with the way the restrictions are right now with adding new licenses that you have to comply with what the new ordinance is. It's a tough call for existing businesses and the direction we want to take it. You know, I would hate to chop them off, but just let them. I would have staff or even myself to have a conversation. You know, we're looking at these things and this is the direction that we're going. Just so you know, this is to be in compliance. This is where we'd like to see you be. I kind of like to get back into. I know we're all over
Signs.
The
Can we make a
signage.
decision on
do signs.
timeline?
The sign.
First,
But-
do signs.
Let's hear everybody's take on timeline to compliance.
Yeah, I think that's the first thing is we need to get people compliant, period.
So how do we see our sign ordinance looking? What do you want to see in this? What do you want to restrict? What do you want to prohibit?
As proposed, I'm good with it. I think the establishment date for signage, do we know if there's anybody non-compliant right now, or is that just for future use?
That's for future use. I
Okay.
just put that in a placeholder.
Yeah,
so.
correct. And the point with that being, I don't want to just put in, 12 months right here, and we have somebody that's currently in this that might be an undue burden on. If this is only for a future potential business coming in, then in my mind, 12 months, once we've got that re-upping of the liquor license and therefore the gaming license, tie those together, I think that's very reasonable.
Well, I think that we could, also, we can, if we change the language with the existing liquor license holders and gaming license holders, we say this is, at the renewal of your next license, we're going to look for compliance within, for existing ones, maybe within the next 6 months, you need to wean these out. We're just not going to allow this anymore. But I understand, I get it. You have a new business that's coming in, give them, a year to advertise that they have gaming, and then that kind of fades away. But I think that, one of the things that I see around town is there are some of them that have the flashing signs. I know we don't allow flashing signs, but it's very hard to enforce that at times. But that say slots. There's several of them that have that in their windows. Is that something that everybody wants to see? That's the only sign, or you don't want any of that? I mean, we need to drill down to what exactly our expectations are.
The language that I'm proposing right now would be no signage at all for advertising gaming. So no window signs, no temporary signs, or no permanent signs on a property that would advertise gaming at an establishment.
I'm for that.
But I'm still also for business. There's businesses now that have gaming signs in their windows that are restaurants. I say give them 6 months and they're done. They have to take them down.
Yeah, we have to get that done. We have to
Including
advertise it out or
existing
whatever in the
businesses
time to
now.
get it rid of.
Yeah,
It's not their
hey, I am fine. with-
primary source of income, like you said. Put a piece of bread on your window, I don't care, sign. All the gaming signs gone. As for, with signage, and we're talking about visualizing, we know who you can see who in town you can see the gaming machines when you walk by. I think that's harder to change. The signage is easy. You got 6 months, we're not allowing those signs anymore. New businesses coming in, no chance they have that sign.
Agreed. Yeah,
I don't see why a new business would have to have a sign even for a year. I don't mean it like that, but if they're coming in, they don't need to advertise. I think people are going to know. You walk in there, you try out the new business, you're going to see if you want to go video gambling, you can figure out where they are.
Yeah, I don't see people driving down the street and saying, "Oh, this place has got gaming. I'm going in there." They're going in there because they see it's a restaurant. And they want to go in there, and it's. Brian, do you have what you need to move
For the
this to
signs,
the next?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Martha, do you want to? You have to come up to the microphone. You know the drill.
Good evening, Martha Ritter. I was just wondering, out of curiosity, how many businesses have gaming? Nobody ever said anything.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
It's so small. 13?
And this includes the 2 new ones that aren't open yet. We
Technically
have 11 right now.
Okay. 11.
We have
Okay,
11.
thank you very much.
Okay, back to Brian. we're like I always tell Eric, we ping pong a lot around here. This back and forth, and oh, by the way,
So to clarify, with regards to signage, the consensus of the committee is to use the language as proposed, but relative to existing establishments, setting the time for compliance to 6 months. Is that what the desire is? All right, next topic.
From the layout of the establishment, basically from the discussion, it sounds like the 10-to-1 ratio is still fine as is. And then for the layout of the establishment, for new facilities that would be created when gaming is created, that they would have a separate room established for where those gaming terminals would be, so that those would be an issue that would be reviewed as part of the board when the license is issued for the establishment, to verify that they would have no visibility outside the business, but they would have a separate room for the gaming terminals.
Why did I think we always had that?
The original requirements when it was passed, they have to have a separate area for.
But it wasn't a separate room.
Correct. So this would establish.
This is going to make it more restrictive.
Correct, because you could have, when Coleman's was operating, an example, you had the stations that were there that separated their terminals from the dining area.
Right.
But it was essentially the businesses were established at the time. There wasn't really room to make those modifications. So there are existing businesses that, when we originally allowed gaming for the community, they were just kind of put in, and there wasn't a lot of new construction from that standpoint. But
and I know which ones, but is that not something too, when we're talking with them, that we could encourage? We'd love it if you could do something. I mean, I still think it's worth it us mentioning, not that we're going to make them change because they're already operational and they didn't have a space for it. But I can think of a few of them right off the top of my head that you walk in and there they are.
Right. Yeah, I think that's where in having more clear direction as far as this is what the requirement is to have that separate room. Then we can further regulate that from the standpoint if there's interior renovations to a space, that they create a space specifically for the gaming, so they're not as prominent and visible from more of the restaurant from that standpoint.
Director Simmons, do you think, well, on Administrator Morimoto's question, half walls should be eliminated?
I would keep them from a standpoint. So one of the preferred layouts that I showed, they have a half wall for the little gaming room that's there. They need to be able to see the entrance to that space. So if the bar is on the opposite side, there needs to be a way to see that. It's more to, I think, restrict the visibility of the machines outside the establishment into the establishment. Just my feeling on that standpoint. So I would be comfortable with a half wall because you're still screening the machines the majority of the time, but then you still have some visibility into that space as well.
What you're juggling is the state requirement of the entrance has to be restrictable, and then our request or our desire to have it not be visible. And it's kind of a challenge. And you think of a couple that have a half wall right now that the half wall is a beer holder. I mean, it's something for people to lean on while they're watching the other people play. So the intent was to control access, and it does that. I think the spirit of what the board's looking for is to take it out of sight.
Yes.
And there's a couple places that we have in town where that would be pretty feasible at a somewhat low cost. There's a couple that if we told them that they had to put them in a place that it was not visible, that they probably wouldn't be able to have them. So I think, again, we're in one of those scenarios where we can have these for future businesses and enforce it. But, what do we want to do with the 2 or 3 or 4 where, to Trustee McAlpine's point, you walk in the door and you could touch them before you touch a person?
I don't know if this is a feasible addition to that part of the conversation, because I don't know exactly within the process when an establishment knows which games they're going to be getting. Is there an opportunity to say something to the effect of, your wall needs to be as tall as your tallest game, so that we're talking about like the half wall, you see things as clear as day. If there's some language built in there, and again, I don't know the feasibility of this, but just a thought of your wall must be as tall as your tallest game.
It was something I actually just jotted down. Was I put in a half wall in the definition, but what is that half wall? Is that 3 feet, 5 feet? So I think we can define a height that is minimum height, of 5 feet or something along those lines that would provide enough screening so that somebody standing next to it could possibly still see in there, but then it, would restrict a lot of what you would see from somebody sitting down playing a game.
So just looking at these examples here. Can you- Gotcha, good. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you bringing us back here. All right, the two businesses on your right, those are the most recently approved. This is what we will be telling people what our expectations are. Is that everybody in agreement with that? Separate room. It's off the, it's off the beaten path.
Just ask a really dumb question, maybe. Where's the kitchen and the one on the far right? Downstairs?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, the basement. Well, just, because these are good examples, because when anybody sits me down and wants to talk about this, I always give an example of what this board is looking for. I'll give a more, I always use 750 Kachina, I think, because that's,
I was going to say,
Can't see it.
the one on the left
Yeah.
is the example.
it's the example that I always tell people that's what the board is looking for. So,
So
And
again, sorry.
no, go ahead.
So again, summarizing it sounds like the consensus of the committee is the language regarding layout as proposed, but with a definition for the minimum height of a half wall. And then is the committee and the board comfortable that this addresses your desires for restrictions of visibility sufficiently?
I think it checks a lot of the boxes. I think that I think a lot of the board, that from what they've told me, is their issues were with the signage. And I think we're
Invisible.
Yeah, I think the signage, but I think visibility. I think people get frustrated if you're going out to a restaurant and you walk in and you see gaming. You're like, I'm trying to go out for a nice, calm, just a nice getaway restaurant, and they don't want to see that
the
going.
noise and stuff like
Are
They
the
can be
two new,
confusing for
are
the
the two
kids, too.
new, middle and rights, are those full walls?
that. Which one?
On one of them they are. The middle one is a full wall. The one on the right is a half wall.
Did we tell them how, the third one, did we have no limit, so it's just a half wall? They can do it half their ceiling height is considered half wall right now?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, is there any other discussion from the committee regarding,
So we're just going with half wall. That's the minimum, right?
Yeah, Brian, do
He's
we
gonna-
know what the average height of a machine is? I mean, because I don't know.
We can get that information.
Yeah, let's get that information and just see.
Yeah.
They offer everything under the sun.
Yeah.
And having gone through this with businesses, I will tell you that the gaming companies themselves, they will push for everybody wants to play the newest ones. And you've seen the newest ones. I mean, they're practically sit-in games. And they will demonstrably show you that they produce more revenue. So there are tabletop ones. There's ones that you could hide, and if I had one in front of me right now, nobody here could see it. So those are
That's what you're doing over
definitely
there.
available, but they don't produce the revenue. So if we start to get into the restricting the type of game, we very much could be reducing their opportunity. So I think if we're not willing to go to 100% wall all the way to the ceiling, then we really can't entertain what games they're going to have. If we were declaring that, then we would say any game's available. I would have a hard time. Haven't seen the data on that end, knowing that the bigger and flashier the game is, the more it produces. That's a real tough one to get in for people who already have these in their establishment.
But why can't we have full wall in the new ordinance? We can, correct? I
You
say
can,
do it.
but what are you going to grandfather in the ones that we have currently that are half walls?
yes.
I guess, yes. I understand you're back in that game, but the new ones we're going for out of sight. That puts you out of sight. And as long as they have the visibility by state law, doesn't matter if it's a full wall, right?
Right, we just have to make sure that they have visibility. They need to
But
make sure,
that's
not us.
their
They need
layout
to
is
make
their
sure.
Visibility to
responsibility.
access. They don't have to have the visibility of the machines. They need, if it's a room, just imagine it's a room like Rustica has. You has to have, whenever it's open for play, you have to have an employee that has their eyes on that area to control access.
Okay.
That's the state mandated piece.
Okay. So I'm in favor of completely blocked full wall.
Just a full wall? Eliminate the half wall? Do you think, is that a criteria
you
that
think,
people
Brian?
ask?
We certainly can draft it. So going forward, it would be any new establishment that would come in would have to comply with the full wall.
Unless they can ask for a variance.
Correct. Yeah, that's, if it's something that the board would want to approve a separate design for a unique space,
Case by
that's
case.
certainly something the board can consider, I think, yeah.
Attorney Euler, are we okay with all this? Okay. Right, any other comments? Good discussion. Thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 7:13.
I'm so sorry for screwing that up.